showing you how you can use arrays with methods in Java. Let's get right into it. So let's start by defining a string array of different fruits that we want. We'll have apples, we'll have oranges, and then we'll have bananas. And I want to write a function that will take each value in this array and put the word frozen in front of it. So after my function runs, I want to have frozen apples, frozen oranges, and then frozen bananas. That's the goal of the function I'm trying to write. So let's figure out how to do that. Well, I'm going to need a public static function, and this will be confusing at first, but follow through with me. So it's actually not going to return anything. It's going to be a void function, and let's call this makeFrozen. So the argument to it is going to be a string array, and in this case, I'll name my array fruits. I won't really change it. So here, I need to define something that goes through every value in the array. What's really helpful for that is a for loop. So I'll start at index 0, and the length of this array is 3, so I'll say, well, index is less than 3. And then every time I go through the loop, I want to say index plus plus. I want to go through a different index every single time. Well, instead of writing 3 here, something we can also write is fruits.length. That way, if the length of this array ever changes, so if we wanted to freeze peaches, so freeze some peaches, and we now have 4 fruits in our array, we won't have to change this from a 3 to a 4. Fruits.length will always refer to the length of the array, so that'll help us. So inside of our loop now, let's actually write that logic to put the word frozen in front of every word in an array. Well, to do that, we need to have fruits at index, so we need to assign something into every index of the array, so fruits at index, and we want to put the word frozen in front of every word that's already there. So we want it to be frozen space apples, frozen space oranges. Well, to do that, we just say fruits at index, I want to add the word frozen space before you. So this is using string concatenation to glue together frozen and the fruit that's already there, and this value will be reassigned into the array. So notice it's a void function. We're not actually returning anything. The argument we get to the function, that's what we're modifying. So I'll make that a little clearer by actually calling the function and showing you what happens. So I'm going to print out the string original array, and underneath that I'll print out the array fruits. So let's say system.out.println arrays.toString and fruits. Notice when using arrays.toString, you have to import this library java.util.arrays. So if we run that, we can see our original array will have apples, oranges, bananas, and peaches. That's expected. So if we call our makeFrozen function now, we'll pass it our fruits array, and now we'll say system.out.println, we'll say frozen array. And then over here, we can put a system.out.println to that same array of fruits, and we can see what happens now. So if we run that, we can see that our original array is still the same, apples, oranges, bananas, and peaches. But what's now the case is in this frozen array, we have the word frozen before everything, frozen apples, frozen oranges, frozen bananas, like we expected. But it's really cool to notice that unlike other functions in Java, so if you had a function that was going to double your int, it would look something like int my doubled int is equal to twice of 3. You're assigning the value that's returned by a function to a new variable to actually use that result. But here with arrays, it looks like we can actually modify the values that we get as an argument without returning anything. And that's really cool. So let's say we didn't want to actually modify this array in place. What we do then in that case is we'd have to return a new array from this function. So here, I define a new array for a string array. I'll call this frozen, and it's going to be the same length as fruits. So it's going to be fruits.length. Inside my loop, I'm no longer going to assign this value frozen plus fruits at index to fruits. I want to store that in my new array, so I don't change what's in my array. Like I want to keep this array for fruits the same. after the function runs. So I want to have a make frozen that doesn't change this fruits array in my main, because let's say I wanted to have that list for the future, so I could do other things like maybe call a function called blend fruit, and I didn't want to put in the frozen fruit, I just want to put in the apples or oranges, or let's say I'm making an ingredient list, I just want to say apples and oranges, not frozen apples. So now once that's done, we can go back to our function make frozen, and now we're returning this new array that we created up here on line 21. So to do that, we'd have to change this from a void function to a function that returns a string array. So that's the change we need to make on the function or method side. We're now returning a string array so that we don't change this fruits array. We're going to write the value into this frozen array instead of the fruits array. And let's see now what we have to do differently when calling this function. So we're going to have our fruits array over here, and we're still going to print out our original array, arrays.toString. That works. But now something we have to do differently when calling make frozen is we have to assign fruits to make frozen. But before I do that, I want to show you that now indeed we're not modifying our array fruits when we call make frozen. So I've called make frozen over here, and as you can see that the original array and the frozen array are both the same. So what's happening is this call to make frozen is no longer freezing our fruits. Well, to fix that, I can now use the return value of the make frozen call to assign it to this variable I'm going to call string array frozen. And down here, instead of printing out arrays.toString fruits, I'm going to print out arrays.toString frozen. And what you're going to see now is we'll have our original array, looks good, and we'll have our frozen array, looks good. But one thing I'd also want you to see is that after making this call to make frozen, our fruits are also going to stay the same. So let me copy this print statement, and I'll say fruits array after frozen call. And then here I want to print out our fruits. So notice we have our array of fruits. We're calling make frozen over here. Notice before, when this was a void function, public static void, and we were assigning values into fruits, after the function call was made, the fruits array was frozen. We didn't have to use this string array frozen to hold the return value. I just want to verify and show to you guys that indeed after making this function call, that the fruits array will be the original unfrozen fruits. So that's a quick example of how to work with arrays in Java and pass them to methods. Thanks for watching.